Good evening and welcome. My name is Jason Farber and I'm an assistant principal here at Los Alamitos High School, and I work very closely with our amazing counseling department. If you have not had a chance to come to our previous sessions of the college mini-series, I'm so glad you're here tonight and continuing this journey with us. Your student's high school counselor was one of the first adults they met when they transitioned to the high school. They went out to the middle schools, got them connected to our site and their academic options, and now you're coming in the home stretch of that last part of the journey, which, as I said at our last mini-series event, is both exciting and terrifying for me. I have a 7th grader and I'm currently excited because as a preteen, his disposition is so wonderful. And as someone who will one day flee our nest, I'm a little worried. But as I learned last time from Paul Kanarak, I don't have to be worried about the application process because it's very easy to follow when you have the right tools like our counselors. Tonight, Mr. Ream is going to introduce our guest speaker, another professional from CollegeWise. And this is a great service I wish I'd had in high school, because writing the essay and figuring out what people wanted to hear about me and the best way to put myself forward on paper would have been a really useful tool. So thank you for being here tonight. And now here's Mr. Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Farber. And we are here tonight. This is one of the mini series that we have. Mark on your calendar, October 8th will be the financial aid evening. So be ready for that. People come ready with their wallets open, ready for the money. So that's going to be the time you're going to get information on that. So again, so glad you're here. We're in store for a great night. I don't know if in the past you came to college night for juniors, but Paul Kanarak spoke. He is the one with a British accent and sounds brilliant and is very funny. You guys remember him? I do. Okay, great. So a colleague of his is here tonight, Allison Lopour, and she has been an admissions counselor 2005 at University of Redlands. So at that time, lots of knowledge and experience reading many college essays, understanding the college admissions process, and then since that time has worked for CollegeWise and has been there for 11 years. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and give her a round of applause.
Hi guys, can you hear me? I've never been accused of people not being able to hear me. I'm kind of a loud talker, so hopefully the microphone won't amplify it and blow anybody's eardrums. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you being here when you could be home on your couches, eating dinner, watching the Emmys. I'm really sorry, I didn't know that it was tonight. When we scheduled this, I would have planned ahead. I only got to see a little red carpet coverage. But my hope tonight is that you leave feeling better about the essay. Quick poll, raise your hands if you're feeling awesome about the essay and you have no fears at all and everything is chill. Weird. Okay. So good news is, this is going to be much easier than I think you think it's going to be when you start writing. So I want to jump in. I'm going to give you some tips on how to tackle the essay and some different types of essays tonight, some things to think about and some things definitely not to do. Before we jump in, let's see if I know how to use the clicker. Hooray. So, as everyone mentioned, you guys. Oh my. Second, did I turn it off? No? Okay. They're like, take the clicker away from her. So as everyone mentioned, I work with CollegeWise. We are the nation's largest college counseling company, and we help students from all different kinds of backgrounds and all different academic levels go to college. We help students plan summer activities, build college lists, and ultimately work on college applications, and like we're discussing tonight, the college essay. And I've been with CollegeWise for 11 years, so I've been through this 11 times, and parents, can I just say, they're gonna be fine. 11 years I've gone, oh no, is this the year I'm going to be proven wrong, and they're always fine. So just keep that in mind. Before that, I worked in admissions at the University of Redlands, and I read hundreds of thousands of applications. I evaluated students, and Orange County was my territory, and so I used to visit Orange County high schools. You guys have been in the college reps are coming to visit. They come sit in the counseling office for 30 minutes and tell you all about their schools. That used to be me in a rental car with a trunk full of brochures, talking to kids about their future. So be nice to those folks when they come to campus and ask really smart and thoughtful questions. Do you have psychology is not a smart and thoughtful question, just so you know. Next slide. So a little about me, and I have over in the corner my colleague Katie Sprague, who runs our Orange County office, and she's Gal Friday with a handout, so if you're missing a handout, fling your arms in the air and let her know. And she'll also be around to field questions later this afternoon, and she is a queen around essays, and so she'll yell at me if I say anything wrong. Next slide. Okay, so we are going to jump in. You guys have in your packets, you're going to be able to follow along with me a little bit. So the first thing I want to talk about is the McEssay. And first I want to go on the record, I like McDonald's. I like it a lot. It's my favorite. You get a perfectly warm French fry, perfectly salted, there's nothing better. And I don't know if you guys know, but the straws are a little bigger than normal, and so you get more Diet Coke per sip. So just a lot of important knowledge tonight. But here's where we're talking about the Big Mac, because of the McEssay. You guys have a quote in the beginning of your packet by a guy named Park Muth, who's the former Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Virginia. So the University of Virginia, also known as UVA, is the most selective school in the state of Virginia. It's like the Berkeley of Virginia. And most students who are applying are above a 1500 on the SAT, are well above a 4.0 in terms of grades. And I hear you guys are going, oh no, these kids seem really smart and high achieving. It's true, it's a really competitive school. And it's a place that most kids don't get into. They're saying no to most of the students who apply. And Park says this about the essays. 90% of the applications I read contain what I call McEssays. They're technically correct in that they're organized and have the correct sentence structure and spelling, but they're boring, sort of like a Big Mac. Now, of course, I take offense to the Big Mac statement because I think the Big Mac does a great job. But the Big Mac is very specific, and here's why I love McDonald's. Because the fries taste the same every time. If you go to McDonald's on Catella, I've been there, guys, I know where it is. If you go to McDonald's on Warner, if you go to McDonald's in Irvine or in San Diego or in Vienna, Austria, I've tested this. The French fries taste the same. The Big Mac is the same. I go to McDonald's because I want exactly what I know and love. Exact same recipe. That's not what we want with the essay. If what you're doing with your essay is producing the exact same thing that everybody else is, there's nothing standout about it. The Big Mac is tasty, I guess that's up for debate, but it's not memorable. And I want your essays to be memorable. And if 90% of these super high achieving kids who are getting A's in their AP classes and taking 57 AP classes and probably teaching a couple just for fun because that's like a fun thing to do, if those kids, if 90% of them are writing boring essays, it's not about getting good grades or how smart you are, but it's about how you approach the essay. And I want to get a couple things out of the way. One, I don't think that writing a great essay has anything to do with your skills in English. It just doesn't. Great essays come from A students and C students and everywhere in between, but it is all about how you approach it. Have you guys ever seen a beauty pageant? Or Miss Congeniality? Okay, thank you. The beauty pageant reference is getting hard because they don't even exist anymore. It's crazy. So you've seen a beauty pageant, you know there are all the different categories. You have the evening gown competition, there's the talent portion, somebody's twirling a baton, or there's like pyrotechnics or tap dancing, and then there's the interview portion. And they ask every contestant, if you win this title, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You know, you're gonna take your crown out into the world, and what's your mission gonna be? And what do they all say? World peace. You guys all knew that. People who had not seen a beauty pageant knew that answer. Like, check yourself. You haven't seen a beauty pageant, you still knew the answer. It's not a bad idea. I am on the record in favor of world peace. But it's not unique. I don't know anything about you. I haven't learned anything about what makes you different than every other contestant on that stage. And what happens when high school students sit down to write the essay, they go, okay, what do they want me to say? And if you do that, you write the same thing that every other high school kid does. Instead, you have to think, what's important for me to tell them? So that's where we're gonna start tonight. I want you to give a great answer that feels authentic to you, but isn't world peace. World peace is great, but you're gonna have to be able to back it up. You wanna find stories that are gonna help you do that, okay? Are we prepared? There's a quiz at the end, so you guys are gonna have to take great notes. Next slide. So high tech. Okay, an exercise. You guys thought school was over. So on the next page, there are 3 first paragraphs of an essay. So before you start reading, let me give you the setup. You guys as a family are bringing an exchange student into your home for your senior year. It's an exchange student from like a far off land like San Francisco. And they are gonna live in your room, bunk beds. They're gonna be in all your classes. They're gonna ride to school with you every day and hang out with you and your friends, okay? So now I want you to read those 3 paragraphs, the beginning pieces of an essay, and then I want you to decide who you're gonna vote for, and we're gonna take a vote at the end, okay? Good luck, you guys. Make the right choice. Just kidding, follow your heart. holding a hand out, flail your arms wildly. Bless you. And no comparing your votes either, you guys. This is a secret polling activity. I think we'll do one more minute. I feel like a teacher trying to tell when everyone's done with their silent sustained reading time. Okay, you guys ready to vote? So we have our 3 students. We have Tony, the very responsible treasurer, Lisa, the volunteer, and Daniel, the pancake maker. Now, don't let your votes be influenced by who's sitting next to you. Who's voting for Tony? Come on, yeah, this is a dad choice. Come on, dads. Dads are like fiscally responsible, realistically focused budget-wise. Okay, we got a few for Tony. Good, I like you guys stick to your guns. Who's voting for Lisa? Wow, Lisa's coming through, okay. And who's voting for Daniel? Okay, so I appreciate the spirit fingers, those of you guys who are really excited about Daniel. So I'm curious, for the Daniel voters, before we jump into this, why did you opt for Daniel? He sounds authentic. He made you laugh, yeah? Right here. A lot of personality. Anyone over here? Yeah. He was different, okay. Way over here. Corned beef on rye, like it's a done deal. I don't even need to read anything else. I stopped reading after chocolate chip pancakes, if I'm being honest. So, you guys, we have been doing some version of this seminar since 1999 when I was in high school, just so we're all clear. Daniel has never lost. And the reason is almost always the first one. He's authentic. He feels like a real person. None of these are bad kids. They're all doing great stuff. They're doing stuff that they're excited about and they're passionate about. But Daniel feels like a 17-year-old. Feels like a real human. I think that so much of this process is teaching students to be, you've worked for 18 years to be like this perfect version of yourself, right? Like everything flawless, not a hair out of place, all your grades are perfect, your activities, do I have the right leadership and service? But so much of what the colleges are trying to evaluate and trying to get a sense of is who you are as a person. And who you actually are is always going to be more compelling than that perfectly polished version of you, which seems scary. I understand you're like, Allison, please don't tell me to show my flaws to an admissions committee. This is crazy. I think there's a way to do this that isn't insane. But the lesson I want you guys to take from this, admissions officers, when they read this essay, are not trying to decide whether or not you can do the work in college. That happens when they review your transcript, and your test scores, and your recommendation letters from your teachers. In the college essay, they're trying to decide whether or not they like you. That's it. And not like a popularity contest, just are you a human? Are you interesting and interested, and do you care about things? That's it. They'll know whether you can do the work from that other stuff. But here, they're trying to decide whether or not they like you. They're trying to get to know you. You guys are all likable. You all have stories to tell. But the first thing you have to do is relax your shoulders when you sit down to type and stop worrying about being what is the most impressive thing, and instead, what's the thing that feels true. I was actually, this sounds like a fake thing that people say, but this is true. Last week I was at Scripps College and I saw Lena Waite speak, who just won an Emmy for writing. She's like amazing. She's all over the place on the cover of Vanity Fair, and she was talking about creating and what does it mean to write and how do you know when something's authentic. And she said the same thing that I say to my students, which is if it feels true, if it feels authentic and honest, that's the right thing. What the people on the other end of it care about, I'm less worried about if it feels true to you. So let's talk about how to actually do that, okay? And also, those of you guys who voted for Tony and Lisa, I support you and they can definitely come to your exchange students. Sorry that they didn't win. Okay, so we're gonna talk through, we have 4 tips tonight. Only 4, that's not even that hard, to help you tackle your college essays. So we're gonna jump into the first one, slide. Do you guys remember Michaela? Gymnast, shout out, Katie. So I said this a little bit earlier, everybody's worried about what's gonna sound good. How many, Katie, rough estimate, how many students have asked you in discussion around essays, but does this sound good? Most students, does it sound good? We have to stop worrying about that. The most important thing, I'm gonna say this about all of these tips, but this one is definitely the most important, is to stop worrying about impressing them and just be honest. And I didn't write the tips in your packet so that you would be forced to write them down, because writing things down helps you commit them to memory. Students, parents, you don't have to take notes, you got them this far, you're off the hook. Don't worry about trying to impress them, because the second you do, you're not being authentic to who you are. So I love reading this line. Imagine a student walks up to you in school and says, like right out of the quad, just wanders up to you. During my junior year, I was fortunate enough to be given the unique opportunity to perform over 50 hours of volunteer work at my hospital. I sought out the internship because of my interest in becoming a doctor, and I believed the hospital would allow me to broaden my knowledge about medicine. The experience has been extremely rewarding because I feel I am truly making a difference in the lives of the children that I work with. How would you guys react if somebody walked up to you and said that? Like a collective groan rolls through the room. This is not in my notes, but she sounds obnoxious. Like that feels like, listen to this fancy thing that I did, and listen to how many hours I spent doing it. Doesn't that sound great? Don't I sound fancy? And what happens is she sounds like somebody who's saying, don't I sound fancy? Doesn't this sound impressive? There's nothing authentic there. Now, I don't deny that students who have done service work at a hospital have had really moving and powerful experiences, have felt really impacted by the work that they did there. But I want to hear about the work that you did there, not the number of hours that you served. What about the kids that you connected with when you were working at CHOP? Who are the students you spent there, the kids you spent the afternoon reading books with and doing puzzles with and keeping company? What was it like to think you were going to have a cool internship at a hospital and then you were changing bedpans? I want to hear the actual story. The number of hours is not important. And what happens is we lean on the number of hours because it's 100 hours. It's very impressive. I love my, do I have any National Cheerleading girls in here? Couple? National Cheerleading, we have, I can never fit all the awards into the description of the activities. Because we mark the hours, and my NCL girls do amazing service. But we have to flip the script and instead tell the story about the thing that you're actually doing. That's the part that will connect with them. And so much of what I think we're going to talk about, you guys will hear this thread all the way through, is connecting with the admissions officers. When you feel in your application like an authentic human, oh listen, let me back up. Nobody works in admissions for the money. If anybody tells you that they do, they're lying to you. Unless you're like the president, the VP of admissions at USC, maybe. But nobody else works in admissions for the money. They like teenagers, and they want to hear from actual teenagers. Parents are like, why? I know. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know. But they really do. I was joking, you guys. I was doing, when I was in admissions, 5 high school visits a day. So that half hour, 45 minutes they spend in the counseling office, they're doing it 5 other places. And then they're going to go work from the Starbucks on Catella, and then they're going to go to college fair tomorrow night and stand behind a table for 2 hours and talk to teenagers. They like you guys. They want to hear from you. But it has to be authentic. It has to feel like a 17-year-old. And the only way to do that is to stop worrying about what they're going to think and instead worry about what you want to tell them. What am I missing? Oh, I want to talk about, okay, I have a couple examples. These guys are not in your packet, but I'm just going to read you a couple chunks of an essay. This is from a student named Megan. And I'll just tell you, when she came in and did her brainstorming appointment and she went home with an outline and then wrote her first draft and she showed her mom and her mom had almost a heart attack. I think you'll know why quickly. Her essay opens like this: I'm a good loser. It's an art I've perfected. When I was 6, I lost a button up my nose. I put it up there and it never came back. This is true. My mother took me to the doctor and he couldn't find anything. To this day, I have no idea where the button went. For all I know, it could still be up there. I laugh every time. When I was a sophomore, I ran for sophomore class president. I stood up in front of my classmates, read a speech filled with big words and fancy phrases, and I lost. The same thing happened when I ran for ASB president my junior year. 1 week after that bitter defeat, I reused my campaign posters and ran for junior class president. I rattled off another inspired speech and lost. I was starting to perfect my art. I knew I was good, clock's going. But I never knew just quite how good I'd become. I honed my expertise in my first NHS meeting. We had to elect a president, VP, secretary, and treasurer. I lost all 4 elections in a matter of 25 minutes. Who can boast that kind of speed and precision? I had finally mastered my art. So her mom reads the first half of this, and she's like, what if I hired these idiots to help you write an essay for? They obviously don't know what they're doing. Now, if you wrote a whole essay about what a huge loser you are, I don't think that that's a great idea. But Megan does a great job at spinning it, and I'm going to jump in towards the end. If I'd been elected ASB president, I could not have been elected gladiator of our spirit rallies twice. Dressed in my school colors, I put on skiing goggles while running over and flying under tables in an effort to win spirit points for the class of 2012. The entire school cheered me on, staring in awe as I flew under the last table and hit my head hard enough to make a sound resembling a small sonic boom. I didn't lose anybody's attention. I certainly didn't lose any spirit points. I'm a good loser, I'll give myself that, but each time I've lost, I've continued to try. Never lost my spirit, I've never lost my drive. I've never lost an opportunity just because I was afraid to fail. So much of my life exists before me, so many obstacles, so many challenges, so much fun, and I want to try all of it. Now that's a kid who's likable. She's willing, now this is a very scary thing in high school, I remember this. She's willing to show, here are the ways in which I'm imperfect. I'm a flawed human. Guess what? I'm very bad at elections. I'm supremely bad at, there's like 15 elections she lost, I don't know. She's very terrible at those. But what she is able to do is show, here's what I learned from that, and here's the space that that created in my life to do these other things. And when an admissions officer reads this, they read that she's a loser, but that's not the part that sticks with them. What sticks with them is that this is not a kid who's gonna bail when freshman physics gets hard. This is not a kid who's gonna get homesick in the first weeks and move back home. This is a kid who's gonna figure out a way to get through it, even when it isn't perfect, even when it's hard. That's the lesson you want admissions officers to take from there. She's like, I'm not good at this other stuff, and that's fine. I am very confident in who I am and the stuff I'm good at. And you guys know spirit as well as anybody. You know the winner is the one who slides under the table even if she gets a small concussion to win the points on Spirit Day. That's what's really important. I think that she is a kid who is confident enough to show colleges how great she is. And part of the message you want to give to colleges is, listen, I would love to go to your school, and I think we would do great things together, but I'm going to be great wherever I go. My life doesn't end if USC says no. It would be a bummer. I would eat ice cream for dinner, but then we move on. Now, the backstory on Megan, she was a great student also. Her essay didn't, change her whole life. Your essay backs up the work that you can do in school, but she was admitted to Notre Dame. She obviously did her homework in high school. And she called us 4 years later, and she's like, hey, I don't know if you guys remember me. My name's Megan. Like, oh my God, we talk about you all the time. And she was graduating, and the Notre Dame graduation committee asked her to read an updated version of this at graduation. So how rare is it that a kid writes an essay where they're truly genuine and vulnerable, that 4 years later, Notre Dame, who sees as strong an application pool as anybody, remembers her and wants her to talk about it? That's crazy. How many kids do you think write about winning the ASB election? All of the ones who won the ASB, every single one of them. And how many kids write about losing? None. And I'm not saying, if you guys, listen, if you won an ASB election, great. I did not have that victory in high school. I'm very proud and happy for you. You get to tell that story, but I think that telling in a way that is authentic means that they can connect with you. Now, here's what happens when your application is submitted to college. When I was reading applications, this was on paper. Obviously now everything's on an app. Who knows how they even read them? But they take your files into committee. And so whether it's a paper file or they're throwing the application up on the screen in front of the committee, their job is to present their students to the committee for a decision to be made. And I fought for the kids I was connected with. I fought for the kids who I could picture on campus, who I could see walking around and hear them telling a story in front of the plaza. Eating the amazing garlic bread from the University Cafe. I miss it so much. Those are the kids I wanted to fight for. So if your admissions officer can connect with you, that means they're going to want to go in and fight for you in committee. They can picture you on campus. They want to find a space for you there. That's the feeling you want them to have. And it has nothing to do with what your grades are. So I'm going to read you one other example, and then I promise I won't just read you essays the whole time. What a fun night. So this is from a student who was not as strong a student as Megan. This is a kid who was B's and a pretty good number of C's. He wasn't a kid who excelled academically. He really liked his video production classes, and that was kind of all that spoke to him in high school. I'm sure you guys love all of your classes equally, and they're all amazing. But sometimes you haven't figured out what that thing is yet. And he was a kid who felt like, maybe I should write about what I'm going to study, but I don't know yet, and I haven't figured out what I'm good at in school. And this is what he ended up with. He writes the intro. He goes on a monthly fishing trip with his dad, You know, when he turned 13, he didn't want to go. Now it's fun again. When my dad and I are fishing on the lake, it's the only time that we're not father and son. He doesn't lecture me about why I should be doing better in school, and I'm not disagreeing with every single thing he says. Just looking to see if any of you guys made eye contact with each other at that line. Teenagers, they're hard. We're just two friends fishing. The funny thing is that we never catch any fish. I think we've caught 2 fish in all of our years of doing this. My dad seems to know what he's doing, so I think maybe there just aren't that many fish in the lake we go to. But it doesn't matter. What's most important is we get to spend that time together. One thing that's great about fishing is hearing my dad tell stories. I never knew this, but he and my mom actually met in college when she was his tutor. My mom and dad too. I guess my dad wasn't a very good student, and my mom had to help him pass all his classes in his business major. He told me while we were fishing that he would have never done well in college without my mom's help. Today, my dad's the CEO of a large computer software firm. It made me feel better to know that my dad struggled in school like me. I probably would have never heard that if we didn't take our fishing trips together. And then he talks about losing that monthly trip when he goes off to college, but still being excited to come home and do it over break. I also know that when I come home for Thanksgiving, Christmas, spring break, and for next summer, my dad and I are going to pack up the car, find our favorite spot on the lake, and spend 6 hours not catching any fish, just like we've always done. It's a great essay from a kid who got C's in English by the skin of his teeth. You don't have to write like Hemingway. If you write like Hemingway, great, very happy for you, but most of us don't. So you've got to be authentic and write in your very best voice, but your version of that. And this is a kid who got into most of the reach schools he applied to. Doesn't mean that you can't write a great essay and get into Harvard with a 2.0. I'm not a miracle worker, but I do think that that essay, when they really get to connect with you, can tip the scales and can change the decision and work in your favor in a real way. Slide. The other thing I want to note about that, while you guys figure out what this picture is, because none of the students know, none of those kids had a dramatic life story to tell. Sometimes my students walk in and they go, nothing bad's ever happened to me. I don't know what I'm going to write about. I'm like, I'm sorry? Nothing bad's happened to you? I don't know what the appropriate reaction is here. You don't have to have a dramatic life story to tell. So the second tip is own your story. Maybe some parents recognize these books. So when I was growing up, we had choose your own adventure books. And you would read them, and at the end of each page, you would have to make a decision. Are you going to try to cross the bridge over the pit of lava? Or are you going to try to crawl through the pit of despair? I don't remember what they were actually called. But you had to decide every time you told that story, every single turn you decided. Sometimes you'd get to the end and it wouldn't end well, so you'd go back a couple of decisions, try to make it go the other way. I think that this is part of how I want students to think about this essay, because you have a lot of control over what you're going to share here. So to own your story, owning your story to me means this is a story that nobody else can tell but you. No other single person on this planet can tell this story like you are going to tell it. And you guys don't have a lot of stories like that. You've gone to school with the same kids since kindergarten, a lot of you. You're on the same sports team with 30 other kids who wear the same uniform, you go to the same practice, ride the same bus over to whatever away game you're going to. You guys have a lot of the same experiences. And part of high school is like trying to do the same things as your friends, right? Like, I don't want to do something no one else has done. That's crazy. But in your essay, it becomes really important to make something your own. And it doesn't mean you have to do something that no one else has done. The way to tell a story that's yours and to make it so that you own it is to inject so much detail that nobody else could tell it. Students, write down detail, all caps, double underline, 3 exclamation points, like a star on the left-hand side. The details are what will make or break you here. So we have 2 examples. And I want you guys to read the first one. There's a version without detail and then a version with detail. This feels like, I'm sorry, you guys have to do so much reading. You thought that this was going to be like a video presentation. So I want you to read those 2 versions, and then I want to talk about what the experience is like reading them and how they're different. Speed readers, you guys can read the second example if you're feeling like overachievers. Okay, so you guys read both versions of that essay. What was the experience like reading the first one versus the second one? Not everybody all at once. I feel like you guys need a little love and attention over here, and now that means you're gonna have to engage in conversation with me. So reading the detailed version versus the non-detailed version, what's different as the reader? Yeah?
You feel like you're there.
You feel like you're there? You can picture it, yeah. What else?
Got some emotion. I got some emotion.
Feelings, yeah. When I read that second paragraph, I picture, when I was growing up, my dad had a camcorder. Students' phones did not used to have cameras in them. They didn't also used to fit in your pocket. So we had this humongous video camera, I guess what TV cameras look like now, kind of. My dad would take it everywhere and videotape us at the zoo, just doing nothing. But what he would always do is he would hit record when he thought he was hitting stop recording. And so there's footage of the ground at the San Diego Zoo as my dad's walking around, and then no footage of us playing on the bronze gorilla or whatever. When I start reading this essay, that's what I start to picture. I have connected it to my own memory. And you guys know when you read a good book, the movie starts playing in your head. You start to watch it like somebody put on a reel of film, and that's what happens when you change the way that you integrate details into that essay. It's a fundamentally different story. And what happens is it's not just a single kid. Okay, you guys, is anyone in the choir here? Yes, a couple of you. You guys are amazing, so proud of you. Shows are so fun. There are a bunch of kids on stage wearing the same outfit. But when you tell the story about looking and seeing your dad in the audience, that's your story. That's your feeling. And so you guys have to figure out a way to tell these stories in a way that they're just yours. And it doesn't mean you have to do something insanely different, but you do have to talk about it differently. So one of my favorite examples of this was a student a couple years ago who went to one of the Catholic high schools, and almost all the Catholic high schools do a mission trip as part of junior year, if not all 4 years. And so the students all go to Mexico or to Peru, and they spend a week doing service, and every single one of those students comes back really moved. This was a big deal. I have fundamentally changed my worldview based on this. And they all want to write about it. And I'm thinking of a student a couple years ago who came in and sat down for our brainstorming meeting and said, I really want to talk about my Mexico trip. I said, great, well, tell me about it. He said, well, we got on a bus, we drove down, it was really hot and dusty, and we had to stop for food, and the gas station didn't have any food that I knew, and then we got back on the bus and we got there and it was very hot again. And we did service for a few days and worked with these students, and it was really great, and then we got on the bus and came home. And I'm like, that's great, sounds like a great trip. But also what you told me is the exact same story every single kid on that trip is going to tell. Exactly the same. You rode on the same bus, stopped at the same gas station, you worked with the same group of kids. There's nothing in there that the student owns. But he really wanted to write about it. And so we kept digging, kept digging, kept digging. And as it turns out, on the last day of this trip, they were working on a school building. And on the last day of the trip, they kind of divided the students up into groups and gave them groups of kids, local kids that they were working with and kind of incorporating in the group. And this student had taken a couple years of painting and a couple years of Spanish, so he didn't really know much Spanish at all. And he's coordinating these kids, and his job is to help them paint a mural on the side of the wall with his 4 words of Spanish and 2 years of painting. And he spent the whole day trying to okay, yeah, a skyscraper, a gorilla, yeah, that's are you not really knowing what they're gonna end up with, just telling the kids, yeah, paint this word that I have to look up how to translate. And they ended up with this very cool mural, took a great selfie in front of it. He had an amazing time. It took us 45 minutes to get to that story and that brainstorming appointment. But that story was his. He was the only kid with that group of kids painting that side of the building on the trip. It doesn't have to be something big and momentous, but it has to be something that's just yours. And so if you're thinking about writing something that other students have done, you have to figure out what part of the story do you own? What part of it is just yours? And you should imagine me when you're writing, when I sit and brainstorm with a student. Oh, and what else? Tell me more. What else? What was that like? Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. Imagine me in your brain saying that. Because the more detail that you can add, the more compelling that's gonna be. But you have to dig deep. Now, if you have a story that you feel like I've dug and dug and dug and I don't have enough detail to make this my own, I would really think about whether or not that's the right story. Because the right story is one that feels like you. This kid is not gonna go on a violin scholarship to college. But this is her story about that, right? Or his, I don't actually know. I was assuming, I'm sorry. Girls are just so talented at everything. So details are gonna change the game. You know, you've been hearing your English teacher say for a long time, show, don't tell. It matters right now. I need to feel what it was like for you to walk in the room. What did it smell like? What did it sound like? What was the feeling that you had? Because then I'm in the room with you. And then when I go into committee, you're with me. Has anybody seen Admission with Tina Fey? Are you lying? Is that for real? Have you seen it? We're like the only 3 people in America who've seen it. That's amazing. So those of you guys who haven't seen it, don't pay to rent it, but like if it's on Netflix for free, then I would encourage you. It's a story. She plays an admission officer at Princeton. You guys have heard about school, it's fine. And what happens is they sit in the committee meeting and they're around this big oak table, you know, like exactly what you picture a boardroom table. And it's, you know, they're sitting around, they're talking to students and they're flipping through the files and as they're talking, the students pop up in the corner. They appear. The girl who plays violin is there playing her violin. The kid who is a rodeo star. What a random activity for me to think of. The kid who's a rodeo star is there with his lasso and his cowboy hat. You picture them, they're there with you. And that is how it happens in the committee room. It feels, I think, a lot of times very impersonal and like there's just a conveyor belt and you go left or you go right, and left is a yes and right is a no. This is my students who go, I'm just gonna try for Stanford. You never know. Like sometimes Stanford can be very selective, we kind of know. But it's not that cut and dry. It's not black and white. It is a process where they're getting to know you and they're connecting with you, and it's not just about the grades. And so giving them the ability to do that is gonna be really powerful. The story and the details are gonna flip a big switch for you there. So details, details, details. Picture me in your brain yelling at you about this. When you read your draft, you have to read it and think, could somebody else tell this story? And if they can, you gotta go back in. You gotta dig deeper or you gotta change the angle. And it doesn't mean that it's not the right story, but maybe you need to drill down and focus a little bit more. Slide. I thought it was so cool with the clicker and then I broke it right away. So the third tip, you guys, my students don't even know who these children are. And I don't even care. This slide makes me so happy. So those of you guys who were born in the 2000s, how dare you? These are the original Olsen twins, not the like drapey cape wearing like Fashion Week girls. These are the true Olsen twins. I miss Full House, the original. So don't repeat information from the rest of your application. Well, how would we do that, Allison? You have told me to fill out the application, I should include every detail of my life. All my activities, all my classes, all my test scores, my recommendations, like what's left. And that is true. You know, by the time they've read your application, they know who your parents are. They know if your parents went to school, where they went. They know your senior classes. They know how many hours a week you spent doing NHS. They've read it all. They've read everything. So what's left? So there are 2 ways to do this. The first is to actually tell a story that hasn't come up in the application before. And that's pretty rare. I would say most of my students don't have things that haven't fit into the application naturally. Like if you have been on a shuttle to the moon, then that wouldn't have fit in the normal application, but most of you guys don't have something like that. So either it's something that really wasn't there, or you're shedding new light, you're giving new information on something they've already heard about. So it's easy in your activities. How many of you guys have started working on applications? Okay, and all the rest of you don't have your hands up. Tonight, we're gonna start the Common App and the UC app. Got it? Yeah, okay. Right after you write your first essay draft. So when you fill out the application, you have room to talk about your activities. On the Common App, you have a whopping 150 characters. That's like the size of a tweet. It's not even a sentence. It's crazy. In the UC application, you have slightly more, but it's still not a lot of room. And so you don't get to tell everything. And so this section can be a great place to really unpack and share what an activity was or meant to you. For example, there are some high schools where NHS is just like a thing you sign up for and nothing happens really. You're in it and that's fine, but there isn't a lot of requirements attached to it. And there are some high schools where NHS is a big deal. And you have to do 10 million hours, and there's a lot of stuff happening. This is where you get to unpack that. So I wanna read you, this is I think my last example that I'm gonna read you guys. This is a kid who talks about something that's already in her application, soccer and Special Olympics, and she shed some new light. This one makes me laugh every time too, so just bear with me. When I was 9, I tried out for my first club soccer team. Unfortunately, tryouts were on the same day as my piano competition. Right after the recital, I ran out of the building and into my dad's car. I was already late for tryouts, so I had to change in the car. On the way to the soccer field, I pulled on my shorts, shin guards, socks, and shoes. I was about to pull off my formal pink dress when I realized that my mom had packed 2 pairs of shorts, but no shirt. There was no time to turn back home. My dad sent me on the field with a go get 'em, and I headed across in that fluffy pink horror, complemented by shin guards and soccer cleats. I mean, just picture it. Just picture it. It's amazing. Somehow I knew that the only thing worse than a 9-year-old girl trying out for the soccer team in a dress is a crying 9-year-old girl trying out for the soccer team in a dress. So I collected myself, walked up to the coach, and said, "Sorry I'm late, I'm here to try out." Every time. Everyone laughed, including the coach, but it didn't matter what they thought. I made the team. 8 years later, I still remember learning not to care what other people think. My second year working at the Special Olympics, I was assigned to be a buddy to a man named Robert. At first, I was a little disappointed that I wasn't matched with a little girl like I had been the previous year, but Robert's enthusiasm was contagious. After we got our faces painted, we remembered that his event was coming up, the one he had been training for all year. Spoiler alert, he wins the men's 40 and up 50-yard dash, gold medal, first time ever, very exciting. Just as I thought the day couldn't get any better, Robert and I heard over the loudspeaker that there was a band playing on the main field. Together, we ran over to the stage, surrounded by buddies and athletes sitting on the grass. Robert and I ran right through the people and up to the front where we danced, just the 2 of us. As my mom and grandma stood on the far side taking pictures, we did the twist, the hand jive, the swim, even swing dancing, not caring that we were the only ones up there. Eventually other people joined in, but even if they hadn't, it wouldn't have mattered. What people thought didn't bother me. I didn't care that some kids from my school were staring and snickering. The dance wasn't about them, it was about Robert. It was his day and I wanted to celebrate and have fun. The day in the soccer field, it had been a challenge to play in a pink dress, but dancing with Robert in front of all those staring eyes was nothing but a pleasure. Now, you guys know what soccer means, right? Cleats, shin guards, hopefully a shirt and shorts. You run back and forth, there's offsides, I don't understand it, there's a goal. That stuff is pretty standard, I know that. When you say 3 years of varsity soccer and 1 year of JV soccer, I can fill in some of the blanks. The ball's black and white, the goalie has gloves. But this extra stuff, this backstory, I would not have known. The application would say Special Olympics volunteer. Work one-on-one with a buddy during weekend-long Special Olympics event. That's it. 10 hours a week, 1 week a year. That's all I would get in the application from the activities section. But now I have a whole different insight into what she's spending her time doing, and 2, what it was like for her. This is less about, and you'll notice, not a single time in this essay does she reference how many hours she did. I don't care. It's in another part of the application, but I also don't care. Because what I care is, like, what's a kid like this gonna be? What will she be like walking around my campus? Now you guys, when I was in admissions, I worked for the school that I attended, Go Bulldogs, best college ever. And I was very protective of that place. When I was reading applications, I was thinking, is this somebody who I want to be sitting next to me in class? Or sitting in front of the Plaza Cafe on the day when I have a 4-hour break between classes and I just eat the longest lunch of all time? Is this somebody I want to be in a study group with? Or somebody who I want to be hanging out in the lobby of the dorm while Sam plays Dave Matthews? Now you guys know when I went to college, Dave Matthews was really cool when that happened. I wanted people who were going to love the place that I loved, and I wanted to take care of it. And I wanted to get a sense of them. And that's what happens when you're able to share the backstory in an essay. This is also the same thing that happens in a great teacher recommendation letter. We get the story behind the grade. This is effectively the story behind the hours. The hours are not important. What was it like for you? That's what I care about. This is also stuff I would have never known if she hadn't shared it. And so you have to give your colleges the ability to get to know you, which means you've got to share those stories. And you'll notice she had a ton of details. Pink dress, we know. It was fluffy, whole deal. Now, you may have a story that you're not sure about. You may have an activity you don't want to talk about. Oh, how many of you guys have heard there are off-limits topics? Like you can't talk about sports, or none of you guys? Or you're just shy? That's crazy. I want to go on the record, there's not a topic that's off-limits. Your criminal activity should be off-limits. But like everything else, it's okay to talk about sports. Even though you go, well, there are 30 other kids on my team, and that's okay, but you have to find the part of the story that's yours. You've got to tell it in a way that doesn't feel repetitive in the application. A lot of students want to use this part of the essay to say, please don't forget that I did this, or please notice that I did this. Students want to write about, I won't ask you to count how many times this has happened. Students say, I want to write about the community service project that I did in 10th grade. And then the end of the essay, they say, it's changed my life. It's completely changed the way I look at things. And then I flip back to the activities section and go, oh, you did it that one time. because it just changed your life and you never had to do it again. Instead of trying to force a spotlight on something that isn't actually a big deal, showcase the thing that you are legitimately stoked about. Which is a perfect segue. Slide to our fourth tip. Oh, my gift works. You guys it never works. I watched The Princess Bride this weekend. It's a classic. Has anybody not seen The Princess Bride? That's your other homework assignment. Okay, work on your essays, watch Princess Bride. It's classic. So the fourth tip is you need to sound like yourself. Do you guys have examples in here? Do you have 2 paragraphs? Yeah, go ahead and read them. The first one is an actual first paragraph before discussing with a CollegeWise counselor. And the second one is after. Let's see if you can figure out the difference. One more shout out. If you don't have a handout, raise your hands dramatically in the air and Katie will bring you one. So what's the difference between the first and second paragraphs for you as a reader? Which one of those would you rather keep reading? Second one. Anybody really stoked on the first one? You don't want to admit it now? Okay, so like I voted for Tony, I'm not going to get burned again. So you want to keep reading the second one, which I think we can agree is a feeling you want your admissions officer to have when they start your essay, right? You want to keep reading it. Why? How's the second one feel different? Anybody? You guys are so quiet. Oh. Sense of humor. Yeah. What else? Yes. Wait, just yell it dramatically. Unique approach to overcoming a torturous challenge and relatable. Who thought Ken was going to kill them? On the record. I was like, this is the end of me. Junior year, it was a good run. I think the other thing that happens there is that first essay sounds like a 17-year-old like this. And the second essay sounds like a 17-year-old who's talking to you. I can hear that in the voice of a teenager. I can hear that story. And that first one feels really formal. Now, this is where you guys have been writing essays in school since, when do book reports start? First grade? It's been a long time. You've been writing essays for a long time. Now, this is a very different kind of writing. The rubric for this is very different. Your English teacher is looking at how you argue your point in a persuasive essay, how you're doing literary analysis for your English teacher. The rubric is totally different. And here, that's not what's happening. They're trying to get to know you and decide whether or not they like you, which is not what your English teacher is trying to do. She's already gotten to know you. She knows she likes you. Now let's move on to the actual grading rubric. But it is super important here that you sound like yourself. It is very easy to feel like, oh no, college essay, I better turn it on. Better show I know all the big words. Myriad, plethora, heretofore. You guys, don't do it. Do you know why? Because when I was in high school, I could also highlight a word and right-click thesaurus, and we just barely had AOL, so that trick is old. Your admissions officers also went to high school. They also know how to right-click. We all also used to put our papers in Courier New to make them hit the page limit. These tricks are not new. You guys have not invented these. You have to write in language and word choice that feels comfortable to you. If it doesn't feel natural to read it back out loud to yourself, you shouldn't write it. When your essay is done, you should be able to hand it to your best friend. Hey, read my essay. She reads it and goes, oh my God, this sounds just like you. I can hear you reading it in my brain. That's when the tone is right. And it's not the way that you text with your friends, or you guys don't text Snapchat, I don't know how you communicate anymore. It's not the way you talk to your friends. It's not the way you talk to your parents, which is just in eye rolls and like, ugh. I don't want to unload the dishwasher. Oh, my daughter's 4, I'm gonna be in for it. This is the way that you talk to an aunt you really like, or your favorite teacher, or a counselor you have a great relationship with. It's the way that a lot of my students talk to me and talk to Katie. This is a more dressed up version of yourself, but it's not formal. We're not doing LOL, there's no emojis, there's no GIFs. I'm so proud this one's animated. But this has to be in a voice that sits right in between. This is your polished self, but it still feels like you. If you are writing in a way that sounds weird when you say it out loud, you gotta rewrite it, because your colleges will know it doesn't feel natural to you. Now, when you walk up to your friends, and you know, in the morning, as Shakespeare once said, blah, 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 something Shakespeare said. If that's how you talk, great. You should absolutely open up your essay with a quote from Shakespeare. Go crazy. Macbeth, whatever you want. But if that is not how you talk, it will sound like you have forced a quote. I'm going to put a quote in there, it's going to sound so smart. That's how it sounds. So you have to write in a way that feels normal to you. Some of you are funny. Some of you are serious. Some of you are somewhere in between. That's okay. Not everybody has to be, Megan, our gladiator with the head injury, she's a funny kid. She naturally writes pretty funny. Brad, the kid who fishes, he's not. That's okay. You have to write in a voice that feels like your own. And I think too, the rules, this is really hard. This is especially hard, I think, for my AP, IB English kids, because you guys are really good at following the rules. Concrete detail, commentary, 5 paragraphs, intro, conclusion, question. And then we switch gears and I go, no. Maybe this is 5 paragraphs, but maybe it's not. And your job here is not to argue a point. The story is just about you. That feels weird. But the best essays, the best topics, the best stories, the best wording write themselves. When you think of it and you start writing and it just happens. And you gotta clean it up, you gotta put in a paragraph break, you gotta do a little editing, but the best stories do tell themselves. And so you have to be really careful that you're not trying to write in a way that feels false. Now this is also, college admissions officers spend their whole lives, this is what it feels like, reading essays. And so it's really, parents, okay. When your kids have done something, they've caused some kind of trouble, there's some kind of ruckus afoot, and there's no evidence, but you just know, your little antennas are like, something is fishy here. Admissions officers are the same way. They can sniff out an essay that doesn't feel authentic to the kid. If our kid who wrote about fishing wrote an essay that sounded like Hemingway, that would not be good. That would work against him because it doesn't match the kind of kid he is on paper in every single way. I have a lot of families, and this comes from students, it comes from parents a lot too, like, his essay has to be good enough. It has to be good enough to get into the school. It has to be good enough for USC. But that is not, I think, somebody who is supportive appropriately in the essay process is not getting a kid to good enough for a particular school. What's the best version of you? And the right college is going to be excited about that. We're not going to have to say it's only going to be good enough if it's good enough for this school. The right college, when we talk about fit, I spent my whole life talking about fit, but we'll recognize that and be excited about it. So when you're writing your essay, say it out loud. If you're going through a section that sounds funny, just say it out loud. And you'll sound like a weirdo in your room, just like reading your essay back to yourself. But the end product is going to be worth it because it will sound like you. I can tell you, I can remember a very specific kid named Molly when I was reading applications who was a great student and would have been completely admissible on paper, and who it was very clear that there were chunks of her essay that she didn't write. And it's scary, you guys. Like, you've been working 18 years for this thing, right? Like college. You're coming, it's Emmy night, you're here. Like, what are we doing? It can be scary, but your actual voice is the best one. I swear. Every single time. Every single time I cried in an admissions committee, it wasn't for a kid who wrote like whoever. It's for a kid who sounded like a kid. You guys are 17. You haven't learned a lot of life lessons yet. Your parents are like, please, someday pick up some of these lessons. But you haven't, that's okay. You don't have to shoehorn a life lesson in here. A life lesson can be, my dad's not the worst. He's kind of cool sometimes. Don't tell him I said that, certainly. But that can be the story. It just has to sound like you. So you guys have in here just a list of some overused essay topics and how to avoid them. I'm not gonna go through these, I do want you to have dinner at some point. But every single one of these can be fixed with one of the tips we talked through. So like sports taught me the importance of teamwork and committing to my goals. How many of you guys play sports? Wow, you guys have weak arms. Raise your hands up higher. Come on, you gotta go to a weight room. So keep your hand up if, when you leave practice, you say things like, wow, today I really learned teamwork and perseverance. Wow, I'm so glad I stuck to my goals. Now I don't believe anything you two say. I can't be trusted. I played 3 sports in high school. I wasn't very good, and this was before you only had time to play 1. But I played because my friends were there. Because the warm-ups for volleyball were so cute. Because we got to play whatever music we wanted in the gym. That's why I played sports. And like, yeah, I'm 30, and I know now that like, I learned perseverance there, and I learned about teamwork, and I learned how to work with a team when some of those teammates make you crazy. But that wasn't what I was thinking at 17. So you just have to be careful. Your parents love to go, well, he's learning all these things. One of my students went on a trip to Spain to visit his, aunts and uncles he'd never met. He came back and wanted to talk about it. His mom's like, yeah, you can talk about getting to know your culture and your history and like where you come from and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, I was gonna write about how I got brave enough to dance in a discotheque with my cousins because I'm not gonna see them for 10 more years. The stories ultimately will be the same and the lessons at the end of that will be the same, but the perspective is different for 17-year-olds. Can I get a slide? Hey, parents, how's it going? So, you guys are obviously supportive cheerleading parents, and college admissions is a family affair in many ways. And you're here tonight, right? We've already discussed, you missed all the red carpet. So you're excited and you're supportive, and I think that this process, if you haven't experienced it yet, you will soon, can be emotional. It is, I would argue, one of the most emotional times. A couple of you guys are like, save me, please, this is terrible. This is a big deal. And for parents, I think this feels like a project you've been working on for 18 years. And this can feel, especially in Orange County, we're very brand conscious. This can feel like, okay, whatever bumper sticker this is the verdict on my parenting, which it is not. It is not. But what happens is I think parents put that energy and worry into the essay. Here's the thing we can edit, right? And the only crime of parents here is loving your kid too much. You're too close. You're too close to the subject matter. A couple of students are nodding like, Mom, are you listening? I think parents can be great cheerleaders here, but I think essays happen best when kids take the reins. And so parents, I will tell you to let your kid tell their story. Even if it doesn't feel like exactly what you hoped it would be, let them tell that story. I can tell, we talked about that spidey sense, I can tell when a parent has written a chunk of an essay. And admissions officers read enough of them, they can sniff it out real quickly. It is weirdly obvious. But I think that the trade here is that students, your parents are worried and they stress you out because they have the nerve to ask you questions about how things are going and how dare they have just raised you for the last 17 and a half years. But they do that because they're worried. And when parents get especially worried, it's because you're not in charge. This is a process students should own. The admissions process, but especially the essay. And if you're not owning it, your parents are going to. So parents, I will go on the record. Take a step back. Read the final draft when it's done. Even better, read it after it's been submitted. There's nothing you can do about it. Students, get feedback. Don't just send it in without nobody looking at it. But you guys have to take charge for your parents to get to step back and let you be in charge. So yeah, parents, 10-foot pole, but students, like, actually sit down and write your essay. Your mom's stressed and she's making you crazy because you've been talking about it for 6 weeks and haven't written anything. She's been asking you about it since school got out at the end of junior year. And you're here tonight, like, oh, maybe I should start my first draft. So now's the time. Let yourself, like, take charge of this so that your parents can relax and let you tell a story that feels authentic to you, make a choice that's great for you. Also Blue Ivy, I can't wait to read our college essay. Next slide. Oh, this is a recap. You guys have these tips. You wrote them down, right? No takers? You're all over it? Okay. We can do our next slide. Okay. I already beat this drum. What is next? Now, I'm sure you have homework tonight. It's like 17 hours, but you need to start now. It's really easy to feel like the admissions process happens when deadlines happen. Like the UCF isn't due till November 30th. Oh yeah, you're gonna have more time in November. Let's definitely wait. Start now. Nobody writes a great essay under pressure, sweating bullets about your entire future. So give yourself some room to write a draft and come back to it. Get some feedback, come back to it, but you have to start writing now. Because when you're under the gun, you're gonna write an essay that sounds like panic, which means it'll sound like every other kid writing an essay under the gun. Those of you guys who start now, November 15th, 18th, look around campus. You'll be able to see the kids who didn't, because they'll have one twitchy eye and one eye's crying, and like one hand is writing the UC essays on November 29th. You're gonna be napping, having eaten a bunch of turkey for Thanksgiving, just relaxing, watching football, like, oh, you seem stressed, that's a bummer. Start now. And you guys have great resources around you. Your high school puts on an amazing, I'm not just talking about me, an amazing college series to help get you guys ready. They're also here on Emmy night, when they keep you home having dinner. They want you to do well, and so utilize them. You've got great teachers at school. You guys have an amazing team here. You're in an amazing spot. You've got to use what's here. Now, it doesn't mean you just dump your essay on your English teacher's desk the day before the deadline. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But I think get thoughtful feedback. And the last thing on here, I want you to get feedback. Don't send it in with nobody looking at it, but I want you to be intentional about it. When I hand somebody something I wrote, I want them to read it and go, this is awesome. You don't need to change anything. That's all I want to hear. I don't want to hear any other version of that. The more people you show your essay to, the more feedback you're going to get, the more voices you're trying to please that are not your own. And I don't mean show it to nobody. I think that you should get a second opinion. But you have to be really careful. My students come back and say, well, my uncle's a lawyer, so he's a great writer because he writes briefs all the time, which are the same as college essays, right? Exactly the same. So he gave me this feedback and he thinks it needs to be this, and my English teacher told me this, and my friend told me this, and my mom told me this. And this is classic too many cooks in the kitchen. And now we don't know what the actual story was that you're trying to tell, because you're weaving together a choir of the people around you and not your actual voice. So start now, please. Do not do this in a silo. Don't do it in a vacuum. And be intentional about who you ask for feedback. Seriously. Be limited and intentional with your picks. What's our last slide? Oh, classic. We have a blog that we write every single day with like a bunch of admissions tips. We talk, big surprise, a lot about essays. And we also have a monthly newsletter that is all good admissions advice and nothing crazy. If you want to keep getting some sanity in your mailbox, and those of you guys who have younger students, that will continue to keep you sane, hopefully, as you approach the process. And we also do events like this around Orange County. So if you're interested in any of that, want to sign up for the newsletter, if you grab that little orange sheet at the front, or Katie has a whole bunch of them, you can just check the box and leave your email address. There's no spam. It's just like helpful stuff to make you feel less crazy. Our mission around college admissions is that everybody should have great information. So not everybody was lucky enough to spend the last hour with me tonight. I mean, you guys, seriously, #blessed. But I want to make sure that if you want to keep getting good advice, it's there. I'm going to wrap up the official portion of the evening tonight. For those of you guys who have questions, feel free to hang out. We'll take a few questions. The rest of you who have DVRs waiting for you with the Emmys, go forth and Emmy. Thank you guys so much for coming. Good luck. Please do not wait. Have a great night. So, it does feel like a lot of those essays happen in a more traditional narrative sense. I think that it is okay to break the mold there, but I think you've got to be clear, and we still have to understand, like, it has to be grounded still. So I think sometimes some of my students who are more creative writers, they want to do a lot of flowery, like, storytelling or not storytelling even, like prose, just these beautiful flowing, like beautiful clouds of words, which is great, but I still have to be able to picture you. And so if it's not, I think you can do that, but it still has to be grounded. Which feels very like weird nebulous advice, but I think the structure of it doesn't matter. I've seen kids write all kinds of different crazy things. You'd be like, how does this work? But it still has to be grounded. I still have to be able to picture you and understand what this meant to you. Yeah, right. Oh, I thought you were kicking me out. I was waiting for you to
get out of here. Impact of what it means.
Yeah. What else? I saw it. Did I see a hand here?
For like seeing an application in the Common App where they have you fill out the details for your community service and activities, what's the important stuff that you should put in there? Because it's so short that it's hard to fit.
So the actual answer, if you're going to hate it, is what's the important stuff to you? Like, what do you care about? Because I was thinking, like I was talking about NCL earlier, where my students have 15 different awards for the different, hours that they've completed, but like what was actually important? Because maybe the awards weren't important. Maybe the work that you did with Girls Inc. was what was important. And sitting with those girls after school and seeing like, okay, I actually had an impact, or I taught this kid how to code, or like what is the actual part that you want them to take away? Because you have depending on what application it is, 100 or 500, whatever characters. It's not a lot of space. And so, like, what do you care about? And if you have a story to tell, it becomes easier for me to connect with, right? Like, yellow rose about a word is great, but I also don't learn anything about you. So I would think, like, what's the stuff that you, if you could only, here's how I think about this. And I think about this with the way that you list your activities too in the application. If you could only tell them about one thing, what would it be? That goes to the top. Okay, if you only get to tell them about two, what's the next thing? And I don't care about what's the bigger award, what's the bigger deal, what's the more dramatic story, like what's more important to you. So that's what I want them to connect to you. Does that make sense? Yeah. What else? I saw another hand somewhere. Come on, you guys, how am I going to share all my knowledge?
You say be intentional about it. Like, 2 people, somebody close to you, somebody.
I think 2 is a good number. I think more than that, it gets a little dicey. And I think people who know you, people who understand your writing, and I think also people who understand this process. Because not everybody does. Like, I had a great English teacher in high school who, and she's who pushed me into creative writing as a major, which is a major, Mom. But I didn't get advice from her on a college essay, and her take was like, well, it should be 5 paragraphs, and it should have an intro and a conclusion. So I think you want to get advice from people who know what they're talking about. And like I said, the college essay is a very different beast than an English essay. And you guys may have an English teacher who's great and has great insight there, but I think you want to just be thoughtful about it. If the feedback is, it needs to sound much more formal, I'm immediately like, red flag, oh no, we're not talking about the same thing. And so that's like, this is where your counselors come into play and can be super helpful. They look at essays all the time. They see applications for, how many, 1,500,000 kids? A lot. And so utilizing them, I think it's easy to feel like I go to the counseling office, get my schedule signed off and like get this thing checked off and then move about my day. They sit in the college world. So having somebody who speaks that language, I think more frequently, can be really helpful. And that's a school counselor, somebody like me, it's like, people are like, where do I get good advice about admissions? Well, one, our blog, obviously, number one, but like, admissions offices write great blogs. Georgia Tech writes a admissions blog that I bookmark all the time. MIT writes a great blog. I'm never getting into MIT, but I learned a whole bunch. So like, we were talking about the personal insight questions. The UC systems talks about the personal insight questions. They say, here's what we're looking for. And so I think we also have to not forget the stuff that colleges are putting out there. It's easy for me to have opinions about things, but like then it's really from the horse's mouth,
I think it's fascinating that the UC did change from the essays to the personal insight questions, because a lot what you're talking about this evening, kids kept on doing. So the personal insight questions, you're picking 4 out of 8. And so they're doing that to drive you, the student, to write more, to be more detailed. And so if you look at the questions, they're much more pointed than what you used to have.
Well, and they're forcing you to tell a story. Otherwise, students are writing 600 words, 1,000 words on the UC. Either writing 1,000 words on, here's my really meaningful community service activity that I did one time in 9th grade that changed my whole life. But I think it's really important that the UCs know about it, because I've heard service is really important, right? UCs are going, no, tell us a story. We're going to ask you a specific question. Unpack it with us. Yeah.
So some of the private schools have another set of essays.
Oh, do they ever?
It's why I come to my school.
Mm-hmm.
How much digging can go into that school?
So, and if you guys have a question you don't want to ask publicly, Katie's standing in the back like pretty lonely, and so anyone wants to go just back and whisper to her, that'd be totally fine. And if you need to go, I won't judge you also. So a lot of colleges have these supplemental essays, the why this college, why do you want to come here, how are you going to contribute to our community, how are you going to contribute to our diverse and inclusive mission, how are you going to whatever, why this major. All the same rules apply, every single one of them. Sound like yourself, a lot of details, don't worry about the thing that sounds impressive. So like, let's pick on USC, which is my favorite hobby. Do I have any USC? I'll still pick on them if you're here, but I just like to check. USC asks, why USC? Why do you want to come study this thing here? And students go, well, you guys have world-renowned faculty, and you have great academics, and you're really high ranked, and you have a great campus, and you have a great football team, and you have all these things, and that's so great, and I would love that. And USC is like, yeah, we told you all that in the brochure we mailed to your house 40 times. Our marketing team did analysis to say those are the things that you cared about, and now you have repeated them back to us. We don't learn anything about you. And instead, what students need to do is connect that stuff back to them. Like, okay, USC has world-renowned faculty. Who cares? Students are like, I care. I'm like, great, why? Why does that matter to you? I think that when we're able to boil it down, and if you approach the college research the right way, and seniors maybe we're a little past this, but I think thoughtful research is what parts of this school make it a good fit for me. Not USC seems really cool, my friends want to go there, so it's probably a great choice. And when you do that thoughtful research picking schools, and you go, well, I know I wanted big football. That was really important to me. And I wanted someplace where kids painted their faces. Because guess what? That's where I have come up in. And I don't want to be somewhere with a lame football team after high school. Like, what a letdown. But I also want to be in small classes. And that's why I applied to TCU. Because you give me the hybrid of the big school energy and the small school environment. Is like the best of both worlds. And I know I've never done better in classes than I did in my English class, which is only 15 kids junior year. When I have teachers who are invested in me and know about me and care about me, I always rise to the occasion and do better in school. That's a kid who's thought about why. And the answer is the same. Like, great campus, great academics, small classes, whatever. But it feels like you thought about the school. You guys know about the Common Application or the UC application. Both are applications you fill out one time and you can check the box to submit it to however many places. Colleges do not want to see applications from kids who aren't going to come. And so they're forcing you to think about and articulate why should we spend time and energy on you? Have you spent time and energy thinking about us? And if you haven't, it's a lot easier to say no. The UCs don't do this because they don't have those school-specific questions. But a place like TCU is a great example. Sees a lot of applicants from California, but are you seriously considering coming to Texas? Or is this a thing you've thought about, or you just heard we're a football school? Because I am protecting, as an admissions office, I want to bring in the right class, but I'm also protecting my admit rate, which factors into the rankings. I'm protecting my yield rate, which is the number of kids who say yes, number of kids I offer admission who say yes to me. The higher the yield, the better your rankings. And what's the other piece of that? Yeah, I don't want to admit kids who aren't going to come, and so I want you to prove to me that you really thought about it. LMU used to be a place that people treated like a safety school. And LMU said, haha, that's cute. Here's a new essay prompt. It's 500 to 1,000 words, and it is philosophical. Like, you don't just get to throw in an essay to LMU anymore. So they're just asking kids to think about it. And you don't have to know the answer. You don't have to write a dramatic, insane ode to that particular college, but you do have to show I have taken the time to think about this thing. Why this school? But the same rules apply. I think the details are important. I think signing up yourself is important. I think that worrying about what is true and not what is impressive is important. And whatever the other tip was, I forgot. Let's maybe do one more, and then I know our booth team is going to want to go to bed at some point. They're like, no, it's cool. We'll stay here all night. Do you have a last question? A lot of pressure. It's going to be a really good one. How important is the major in general, or mentioning it? I don't think the major is important at all, which goes against every parent. I'm sorry, all the parents are like, no, we told her she had to pick a plane. Most of my students are undecided, or they have an idea, but they're not sure. I mean, in high school, you have done math, English, science, history, foreign language, and an elective, maybe. And if you didn't find your soul, if you didn't find your path, you're like, what do I do? Penn State, shout out to Katie, has 250 undergraduate majors. It's like feminist Russian literature. I don't know if you have that, but they do have crazy stuff that you haven't heard of. And so I think that I think the major is as important as it is to the student. That's actually probably the true answer. Some students in high school say, I want to be a journalist. I was in a newspaper for 4 years in high school. I'm the editor this year. I want to go to school to study journalism. I want to write. That's what I want to do. That is going to drive that student's college search, and I would be shocked if it didn't come up in the essay. But for lots of kids, they're not either that connected to their major yet, or they're not sure. And so I think that it doesn't have to be the most important thing. And the vast majority of colleges are open and welcoming and flexible with kids who are undecided. There are only 2 places in the country you can't go in undecided. Cal Poly SLO, the Mustangs, and University of Pennsylvania. And everywhere else says, you're 17. You probably haven't figured it out. Are those both on your list? Yeah. Better pick a major. So I think it is as important as it is to the student, but I do not think the kids should feel pressure like I have to pick a major to have a path or a story. And I don't think that we talk a lot about the narrative in the application. And I think that people feel like, okay, I have to be, maybe I want to be in business. So I need to be good at math. I need to be in a business club, the accounting club, and these things all have to fall in a row. I would argue that kids who are interested and interesting in anything are kids who colleges are going to be excited about, regardless of whether or not it's connected to your major. Some of the coolest stuff I did in college had nothing to do with what I studied. By the way, my entire career has been dictated by things I did outside of class. and what I studied was amazing, but like the outside of class part, it has dictated my entire life. So I think it depends on the kid. Yeah. I know it's late and I want to let these guys go home, but if you guys have other questions, you can write them on that orange sheet and Katie and I can follow up afterwards. Like I said, if you want to do the newsletter or anything, you can just throw that orange paper somewhere and we'll find it. Thank you guys for hanging out late on Emmy night. For real. I'll talk to Dr. Stone. We will not let this stand, honestly. But I really appreciate you guys being here. Good luck. Please do not be stressed. You're going to be fine. Every single kid who's ever come into my office is fine. You guys are all going to go wherever you're supposed to go. You're going to graduate, you're going to get jobs, and you're going to pay for your parents' entire lives. Right? Yeah, that's what we're working for. Thanks, guys.